Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
incredible. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission? Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I'm your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and trial attorney, focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe Spotlight Sessions, we are joined by Clive Loseby, the owner and co-founder of accessiBe's. Welcome, Clive.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for having me on board.
I'm excited to have you. And just we spoke last week, and just the conversations we had, I've been thinking about it ever since, and I'm excited to kind of share, for you to tell more about yourself and your unique disability journey. So let's jump right in it. Tell us more.
Okay. So back in 1989, when I was a teenager, me and my girlfriend Jess were involved in passengers in a very nasty car crash. Gave us all life-changing injuries. Everybody was involved. It left Jess in a wheelchair. She was paralysed from the waist down. We were going to get married that year, but we had to put it back a year because she was in rehab, learning how to use a wheelchair. So we got married, and we live in Chichester, which is a beautiful historic city in the south of England. And we discovered after the accident that it was a beautiful, historic, inaccessible city. And there was no Disability Discrimination Act. There was nothing in law that demanded accessibility. So Jess, being Jess, decided to do something about it. She got together a campaign group. Because of her relentless campaigning, the local paper Amazing, they got behind it. The District Council put in 4,000 drop curbs in Chichester, and one by one, all the historic buildings in Chichester, some of them hundreds of years old, they all fell into line, made themselves accessible, with no legal backing, no legal powers to do this. It was just the fact that they wanted to get behind what Jess was doing. So she literally changed the face of Chichester. She went on to become an international digital artist. I should say she was the singer in my band at the time when I had a lot of hair. And the band thing didn't really work out, but she went on, became an international award-winning digital artist. That's kind of how she got into web designs and doing websites. And I did music. 2007, we ended up deciding to start a business doing websites. And that's literally overnight. We were successful at what we did, but we weren't making a lot of money. So we said, let's start businesses. Let's actually start building websites. So we did. And that's when Jess discovered that the landscape of accessibility in the virtual world was very different to how it had become in the real world. Because by now, 2007, the Disability Discrimination Act, which is what we had in the UK, had been around for 10 years. And physical accessibility to buildings was, at least expected. And it wasn't great, but it was certainly, you had it. As far as the web was concerned, Jess then discovered that although there were rules and regulations for accessible web design, and they've been around since 1999, basically very few people were doing them. And the only people that were doing them were people who were creating websites that had really quite awful, nasty, clashing colours and glaring fonts, and they just did not look great. Jess, being a digital artist, found that kind of difficult. So actually, she said, let's create websites that are at the top end of accessibility by following these rules that have been around, but also really strongly designed. Hence the name Access by Design, which is proving to the world that you can be both fully accessible and strongly designed. So that's what we did. And we started the business, and we picked up some awards for what we did. Moving forward slightly to 2011, that was the year where we, as a company, because we'd grown, created the web's first ever mobile, tablet-friendly, fully accessible website. It was the year Responsive Design came out, and we basically combined all of that with our accessibility techniques that Jess had developed and created this thing called responsive accessible design. And I actually thought we were going to be bigger than Microsoft. But there's a little bit more to being massively successful than just being the first at something. So that's kind of where we got to, and that's kind of how our journey came about.
And when it comes to kind of the percentage of websites that have been accessible over the years of the internet starting, would you kind of say that in the US and in the UK, like where do we stand? Is it very similar? What's the landscape?
Well, the landscape is bleak. We're now in 2023 and we are 24 years after website accessibility standards were first developed. So it's not like people can say that it's not been around. The problem is nobody does it. And I say nobody does it. WebAIM do a survey every year. Last year, or the year before last, no, it was last year, 98% of the top 1 million websites on the web failed basic accessibility tests. It's improved slightly. It's something like 97.6% this year, but it's absolutely dismal. So in terms of how many websites does that equate to? Well, if you work out there's around 280 million active websites, that means around 200, there's not as many as that, but it's around 230 million live websites today do not meet basic accessibility needs. And we're not talking complex accessibility needs, we're talking at a very basic level.
So obviously around accessibility, there's so much more that can be done that should be done. It's a matter of what are your biggest beliefs? How do you think you can motivate, or what conversations need to be had around letting the world know that accessibility matters?
Okay. Well, I would say the first one is awareness. I was extremely lucky or privileged to get the opportunity to do a TED Talk about a year ago now. And it was at a TEDx event on the Isle of Wight. And the theme of the day was "If Not Now, When?" And I was invited by Dale, who organised it, because he felt everything I'd been saying about website accessibility fell into that kind of that theme. So I gave my TEDx talk over there, and then towards the end of last year, TED decided to feature on TED.com. And what that has basically meant is that I've now got a message that is out there and it's reaching people. I actually thought it was going to be quite a technical talk, but I discovered that people have no basic knowledge of website accessibility at all, even as a concept, that I had to go from a very basic level, so that at least anybody watching it would be able to come away with a conceptual understanding, because that is the biggest challenge. I realised after years of talking about website accessibility that I had to add the words "for disabled people" on the end of it, because people just didn't get it. What accessibility? Because the concept of it was something that they just could not understand. As it was, I got that wonderful opportunity to maybe start to change that.
And so with the TED Talk, what was the big underlying message? Like if you had a microphone to reach out to the world, how would you summarize it in a few sentences, or however you want to talk about it?
Okay, so what I would say is that very simple analogy, because you don't need to understand the technicalities of websites and accessibility in the same way that I drive a car. I barely know how to change the oil, and that's okay because I can still drive the car. You don't need to know the technicalities. That's for your web designer to learn. But the concept is really straightforward. If you have a doorway that is a narrow doorway, and therefore somebody in a wheelchair cannot get through it, make the doorway wider. Not only can somebody in a wheelchair get through it, but somebody pushing a child in a pram, I think you call them strollers in the US.
Yeah, wheelchair stroller. Or sorry,
get through.
a baby stroller.
Somebody with bags of shopping or carrying big boxes can also get through. So basically, it's not about making a website that works for a niche, or niche is maybe the wrong word, but a so-called minority of people, because by making it beneficial to them, you benefit everybody. I say, think of that doorway getting wider, everybody benefits from it. And once people understand that, and then realise, particularly business owners, that people with disabilities have got money to spend. And if they can't spend money with you, they will find a website that they can spend their money with. And once you start thinking on those terms, and then you start realising about the kind of sums of money that we're talking about, it becomes a no-brainer.
It does. And when it comes to like the physical accessibility world or the digital accessibility world, is it, if somebody's stuck on like we made our physical front accessible, and that we've done enough, like what would you say to them about why the digital world? I guess you've said a lot about buying power online, but like what else would you want to say about making the jump to understand that the digital world is so important?
Well, I think because of the massive growth of online, particularly since the pandemic, the concept of people working from home has just become the norm. But actually, if you think about it, physical barriers are just barriers. And actually, if people can work remotely, then people who are perhaps physically disabled and cannot get to work easily, but are able to work remotely, can be just as effectively. So in a way, the pandemic has been able to change people's minds. But one of the difficulties is that some companies tend to change back, and there's been a bit of a move to get people back to the office. Now, I understand that because there is a lot for having a corporate culture and having people work together. But the reality is, if you can't easily get to an office, but you're able to work just as effectively from home, then why shouldn't you?
It's been game changing for me. Like I am a trial attorney by day, and every day I would have to drive, about 7 miles through 50 stoplights, and then deal with, uh, the parking in Washington D.C., which is not great. Dealing with a building that was built way before, and I had like a separate entrance to get in with. It was not easy to get around my building at all. And now being able to work from home, I'm able to do an extra 2 hours per day, and it's convenient. My transportation, you name it. There's so many layers of it that made it more difficult for me. And it's, whether you have a significant disability or not, I think it should be an option. But with, and I love when we were talking before last week on the fact of you're, as a successful kind of business owner with Access by Design, you've hired many employees, and you've also hired many employees with disabilities. I would love for you to share what you've learned from those employees.
Okay. Well, for me, the only way that you can truly tell if a website is accessible for disabled people is if you have disabled people test it. And I'm very, very lucky to have, or privileged to have, a team of amazing people who have physical disabilities, cognitive, and visual. From them, I've known about accessible web design for a long time, and I picked up, I would say, quite a bit of knowledge. When these guys come on board, you realise that there's actually so much more. And the reason for this is that the standards that exist that people all look at, or those that know about it look at, is just the starting point. And the people who wrote the standards made it clear that that was just a starting point. The real way to find about accessibility is to have disabled people test sites. And for me, that is the best part of what I do, because they share their screens with me, and I get to experience in a way, in a more immersive way, what they experience, and it is amazing. They're just using websites in the way that they use them, but they find the issues that you wouldn't necessarily find otherwise, and it's very humbling, especially when I realise that after that session, I'll go back to using the web in the way that I use it, but they will have to carry on in that way with the daily struggles, and that's what inspires me. That is what makes me absolutely determined that I'm not going to stop what I do until every single one of those 230 odd million inaccessible websites have at least reached a basic level of accessibility.
I love that you're on this mission and that you're part of the narrative, the story of trying to figure out how to get there, and hiring people with disabilities to tackle kind of the web accessibility world. What would you have to say about it? What can we do better as a world to truly go after those 230 million? What have we not done that we could be
Okay,
doing?
we haven't understood the value of disabled people. I pay my guys really well because and they earn what maybe some doctors earn. And the reason for that is that's what they're worth to me. But in the rest of the world, these guys wouldn't even get minimum wage jobs because they're not seen as having value. And yet, I do audits for governments, for hospitals, for large companies with these guys. And what these guys find and do changes culture and I'll do a report of a website, and it'll be long and it'll be detailed and it'll be quite dull and technical. But then I'll also supply these videos. And it doesn't matter what you think of my report. If you've got somebody like Mede, one of my blind testers, on a website trying to book a ferry and not able to book because the book now button, which works with a mouse, doesn't work with a keyboard. And when you've got that on a video, that speaks volumes because it means that people understand. And you see, it's not about making people feel bad. It's not about making companies or agencies feel, difficult. It's about helping them understand, because every time I do an audit and I work with them, they always have the same. They really get the message and they will never code in that way again. That is why this mission about changing the world one website at a time is not going to come through my company building 230 million websites. It's going to come by spreading the message, by training support, and by working alongside some truly amazing other disabled people who are doing incredible things. And when we can somehow work together, we're going to see seismic change.
Absolutely, it's together we are stronger. There's no doubt about it. Like when I'm, DC, Washington DC is a very political world. It's where things get done in the U.S. politically speaking. And when I wheel down the street, I turn a few heads. But if I wheel down the street with 10 or 20 or 30 of my friends also in wheelchairs or other disabilities, everybody's turning their head and they start listening and hearing, and it becomes that much more impactful. So like, one of the things that I know we can do better is people with disabilities are either the most unemployed or underemployed population in the world. And, when you say 230 million websites need to be addressed and need help doing, like, what would you say? How could you connect those two together to like start a revolution?
Well, you start a revolution by building a global army, because to be able to test a website, you need to have you do need a good internet connection, and you need to be able to use a website, and be able to understand and use a website normally in a way that's normal for you, and that's it. Because everything else can be taken care of. If you've got a decent internet connection, you can do a screen share. So people don't. My testers aren't on camera because it's not about them being on camera. It's about their journey being on camera, and that's the thing that makes it truly something that I'm just truly privileged to be part of, because it is mind blowing. And yet it's not mind blowing for them. It is their struggle, their challenges. But by having that challenge, by being able to share that challenge with people, then people truly understand. And when they truly understand, they don't look back.
Well, website owners, like they put a lot of time into building a website to create an experience. They want people to start from the beginning to get to the end and everything in between. There's multiple pages to a site for that purpose. There's just not one page on a website usually. And this is the experience you want everyone to have. And to not create access and inclusion as you would want it for one person to the next, like you need to make sure that they have the opportunity to have access to that information, those products, those services. And if you don't have that doorway open for someone to explore every page, you're not doing what that initial mission and vision of building a website would be. And I always want website owners to understand, like, what if you got blocked at the door? What if you got blocked, right before the finish line? How would that make you feel? And, it would suck. It would not be fun. So, like, by bringing more access and inclusion, you're giving people better experiences, and they're going to return again and again as repeat customers. And I know we talked a lot about employment, but, like, as a business owner, you've done it. You've hired people, and you've found skills and talents of different people in the workforce. For other business owners that want to start even exploring hiring people with disabilities, what advice could you give them?
I think the key thing would be to look at what it is you need, what skills that you need, and then think about what would need to change if you had somebody with a disability working for you. So a simple example, you might have a desk that it needs to go up on some kind of blocks or something to make it easier for somebody in a wheelchair to get underneath. You might need to have a few simple things, maybe have braille signs on doors in addition to the normal signs for blind people to be able to use. I mean, there's a ton of information out there, and there's also a whole ton of people who work in this area who've got a wealth of advice. And what they will do is they'll come and give you some, visit your business premises and talk to you and say, look, these are the things that you could do. I think it's a case of understanding that if you look past the disability, and if you look past the any preconceptions that you've got, and actually focus on what you want and what they can do. I'll give you a very simple example. Jess became an award-winning international digital artist, and this was pre-social media, so it was before Facebook or anything like that. So she won awards. We went to the States, we went to Italy, Spain, all these places where she was picking up these prizes, but she was picking them all up because she was being judged on the strength of her work. Nobody knew that she was disabled. We'd just turn up, and their faces when she turned up in a wheelchair, they go, what? Because you saw them having to kind of reinvent everything. But that came about because she was an international award-winning digital artist purely on the merit of her work. This was in the late 90s, like I said, the whole net art movement that she was part of. And because she was judged purely for that. And that's where it's a case of thinking that, yes, people can really deliver. You just need to find ways in which that work well for them. And I will tell you something else, that because it is hard for disabled people to get work, it's 40% unemployment. Even now in the UK, where we have low unemployment, mostly because people are working 3 jobs, but for disabled people, they've got maybe 40% unemployment. if you make accommodations so that you can actually want them to feel inclusive and feel welcome, you're going to get so much more rewards back to you just by showing that you really care, because of the fact that everything is stacked against disabled people. If you make that small effort, that what you'll get back in terms of staff loyalty, I would say, is absolutely huge. And it, when people get it, they go, well, yeah, this is obvious. It's so obvious. Why did I not think of it? And I think that is the gulf, that is the gap between helping people understand why it's a good idea. And I really don't care whether people do it for altruistic reasons or financial reasons or for whatever reason. If they start doing it, it changes their mindset. And here's the interesting thing. I said there's low unemployment at the moment. There is. There's high unemployment amongst disabled people. That means there's a lot of people who are willing to work, who want to work, who can work, provided you can find the best way to do it. And you are going to benefit. Don't talk to me about companies struggling to get employment, to get skilled people to work for them, because you can get disabled people who can develop those skills just as easily, and they can absolutely perform brilliantly for you. So it all comes back to mindset. That's why the TED Talk was aimed at a basic level of getting people to understand there's 1 billion people, give or take, with disabilities in the world. That's a lot of people. To ignore that at every level, which has sadly happened for so long, it's insane. And I'm not bigging up any company here particularly, but I have to say I have been struck by Google's approach to disability and the fact that they employ people at senior level, and those people are just welcomed and included. And I know you've had experience yourself in which the same thing. It's possible to do these things. You're a trial lawyer. I remember you told me that you became a lawyer without being able to turn a page because you couldn't. So you had some challenges, but at the end of the day, you still did it, and you're a trial attorney now. You are the proof that that you can represent just anybody just as much as anybody else can.
Thank you for that. And it's a matter of putting the hours in, gaining the skills that you need, and then creatively being able to do it and deliver. And I deliver it differently than most, but I deliver it in a very effective and powerful way. And I love contributing to the world. And it's when I did graduate from law school, I graduated magna cum laude, which I was near the top of my class when it came to the fact of my classmates not having disabilities. It's just getting a chance to dance allows you to really show what you're made of, what you're worth, what you can give. And within the disability world, one of the things that I got very lucky. One of my professors in law school was like the godfather of writing the ADA. He was in the right place at the right time and drafted the language for it, so in the technical matter, it could pass. But what ended up happening as the ADA was coming about, all the different disability organizations and groups kind of came together in a unified way, and we got the ADA passed. And ever since the ADA has been passed, so many different disability groups of populations, whether have a spinal cord injury, you have cerebral palsy, you are blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing. There's dozens. There's so many different types of abilities and disabilities in this world. And since the ADA has been passed, more often than not, each one of those disability groups have been fighting for their own unique policies, which makes it that much harder to get passed because we're not there together as a collective group. We're divided. We're in different divisions. We're fighting for our own unique worlds. And I would love for there to be more unification, more coming together. And I just kind of wanted to end on what your thoughts on what do you think we could do better just to kind of unify the disability communities, the web accessibility communities, all communities to kind of get around making the internet more accessible?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because one of the things is that if you have a disability, you have to fight extra hard to get where you want to get. That's just obvious, and that probably is one of the reasons why people tend to be fighting for what they do and what they focus on, because that's what they've always had to do. I think the thing that would unify them is when they feel that society is truly recognizing them, and then there will be less of a need to focus on their specific disability, because suddenly people will feel welcome. And this has to come from government, it has to come from businesses, large and small. It has to come from everywhere. And here's the thing. I don't know what the percentages are. I can't remember. Somebody did tell me, but there is a large number of people who at some point in their life will become disabled, whether it's permanently or whether it's on a temporary basis. But that will happen to so many of us. I don't know whether it's over half or whatever it is, but it is a large amount of the population. So therefore, it's not something that doesn't affect you or affect somebody close to you. What will unify everybody is when we have a collective recognition that we all benefit. If we work in a way that makes allowances for people, will make allowances for everyone. In 1999, you probably remember what the web was like in 1999. It wasn't so great, shall we say? But back then, the guys at W3 knew that one of the biggest user groups of this thing called the web would be people who couldn't get access to goods and services easily in any other way. That is why in 1999 they drew up the guidelines that have improved, but they basically haven't certainly changed that much. So they've been around for so long. And I think to bridge that gap, to bring it so that it is not seen as something that caters for disabled people, but actually brings everybody up to scratch. When people feel that they are fully included, and the one unifying thing that they can do is never give up hope. Never give up hope. Because hope is the one thing that's kept me going the whole time, where you come up against the ignorance, prejudice, barriers of all kinds, as I'm sure you have. I know you have. But the hope that things will change, that's what people must hold on to. And maybe I'm being slightly naive. I don't care. Still believe that it really can change. And I think we're going to see a massive global shift over the next couple of years.
Clive, well said. And thank you so much for your time today and for being on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions and for all that you do to change the world. Thank you so much, Clive.
Thank you so much, Joss. It's been brilliant to see you again.
And everyone, thank you for staying to the end. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and follow us on @accessiB_community. And until next time, take care, everyone, and have a beautiful day.